I first became involved with BREAD when I joined the Office for Social Concerns of the Catholic Diocese of Columbus, and it was one of the projects I was asked to help coordinate, and ultimately was given the responsibility for the Catholic Campaign for Human Development, which is a major funder for BREAD and has been for years. My first memory of BREAD is listening to the successes that had happened already with the raising of some abandoned houses, with the Housing Trust Fund, with the education and the reading programs. It was really empowering to see how well our community could come together to make a difference for those who really don't have a strong voice. I know we have a very specific process for working on projects, and I think that's kind of the genius part of what we do, because there is this entire year at least of background information, looking for the details, making sure the problem is well written, well expressed, and some solutions are really available. And then to find out who the decision makers are and how we need to get to those either decision makers directly or the people who can influence the decision makers. And that just works really well, because it's a very good process that is very persistent without being a real bully about it. And I think there is force in numbers that sometimes can be unsettling to people in the public eye, but it's just their constituents talking to them. And that's why I think it's important that they listen to what we're saying. That's all I want to say about that. I can't think of anything else to say right there.
Well, you reminded me about something that I remember in the early days, and that was this whole idea of abandoned properties.
Yes.
BREAD was working on that, and there were two clergy members, one Catholic and one, what was that church over on Main Street where BREAD had its offices? Michael Cobbler was the pastor. The First English Lutheran Church, there we go. So at one point in time, BREAD was housed in the First English Lutheran Church, which wasn't too far away from one of our churches, the congregation of St. John Holy Rosary on South Ohio Avenue. So our pastor at St. John Holy Rosary was Father Bob Scullin, a Jesuit, and Michael Cobbler was the pastor of the First English Lutheran Church. And the two of them got together, and they were focused on trying to get city leaders to address the problem of abandoned housing. So they found the 12 worst examples of properties that had been abandoned and where there were problems. People were there was crime activity around those houses. They were unkept, they were unsafe, there were children that could be playing in an area that was unsafe. They were very worried about it. And so they developed a bus tour. And so they got a couple of COTA buses chartered, and they got all these city leaders, the safety director and different city leaders, to get on these buses, and they had a bus tour of what they called the Dirty Dozen. And these were all houses that had been abandoned, that code enforcement wasn't requiring the landlords to do anything about them apparently, and tear them down. And so they took people around to see all of these properties. They described the problems in the neighborhood, and came back to Holy Rosary St. John for a meeting, again, a public meeting where they were asking for commitments from those city leaders. And lo and behold, after a period of time then, the city was very good about taking action, and that problem began to be addressed. But it was a wonderful example of it was a BREAD project, but those two men, Father Scullin and Michael Cobbler, they were instrumental in getting that to happen. So, a success for bringing our faith into the public square in a way that can achieve a greater level of justice in the community.
And that's one of the main things I like about BREAD, is the fact that we do bring people together who have like minds and are willing to work on issues together. but it also connects us, again, as people with like mind, people of faith who are concerned about the community, so we can work with one another on side projects too, but also support Bread. I only know of one time that we really stepped out of the process to join in the payday lending initiative that was going on in the state to get legislation passed to deal with and try to rein in payday lenders. And we thought we had done a pretty good job. Unfortunately, there are enough loopholes in the law that was written that job still isn't finished, and we're still working on that. But it was terrific to see Bread step up with our member churches, synagogues, and parishes to say, this is wrong. We need to do this on a state level, and that was terrific. I think we're wonderful in looking at local issues, and that's still important. And Bread does give us the opportunity to work together. And because of the process, again, with the house meetings and then the parishes and churches that come together, and then the meeting where we pick the next topic, I mean, that's just really a nice process, because it is long-term involvement. It's not that quick burn satisfaction. We're here for the long haul. And the follow-up to everything we've ever done in Bread is still happening. And that's genius, because you can't change a politician's mind and think it's going to stay there. You really have to keep going back and reminding them, these are the steps we've taken, here are the promises made, let's make sure we're following through on those promises, and that we maintain that level of commitment and concern, whatever the area or the topic, to keep our community safer and growing for everyone. I mean, the key to me with community organizing is making sure that everybody has a voice. Everybody has an opportunity to be heard, if not directly, through their advocates who are the members of Bread.
What was your first Nehemiah action like? Do you remember?
I thought it was my first Nehemiah action I thought was pretty impressive. There were, 300 and some people in one church, it was all packed, and it was really fun. And now I look back and going, wow, look where we are now. I think we think it's a disaster if we don't have over 2,500 people out at the fairgrounds, and it's so energizing, not only to see that happen within the community and with folks who have been working as long as I have on some of these issues, but just at this last Nehemiah action, 4 students from OSU who I'm working with on a separate project came to the Nehemiah action. They were so excited, they were so energized. It's really spectacular for me to see that next generation of advocates jumping on board and thinking, this is the coolest thing I've done in a really long time. And for a college student to say that, that's kind of impressive. I remember my college years. So, yeah, just the way it's grown, the enthusiasm, the focus, the civility, the absolute adherence to the rules and regulations of the game. In fact, the only time I've known anyone to break any of the rules, it was usually a politician or one of the speakers that came in to be questioned, and then they acted surprised at what happened. And it's all well vetted, it's all well understood. In my mind, the one thing I'm thinking about was just some ridiculous grandstanding by someone who should have known better. But I appreciate the process.
I think an important thing to realize is that justice work is difficult. Now, we're all called to act justly as individuals, but if we're trying to address structural injustices, it's very hard for us to make progress individually on eradicating or even addressing some of those structural injustices. So what Bread does is it offers a space for the faith communities of Columbus to come together, to agree upon a problem, and to work together to solve it. And there's not too many places where that happens, particularly in trying to address structural injustices.